Pendulum Swings podcast. My name is Mark Parfitt. This is...
I'm Paul MacDonald.
And this is...
I'm Tom Molyneux.
And today we're going to be talking about masculinity, what it means to us, a little bit about where we first saw it and where we sort of see it going in the future. It's an interesting topic that we are all passionate about, we've talked about and researched and all kinds. But before we get into that, should we talk first of all a little bit about, give it an update on Pendulum growth, our sort of non-profit organisation and what we've been up to so far. So lads, what have we been doing?
I think it's a good one to start off with, isn't it? Because I think obviously we're out there, we're posting a lot of stuff, we're doing podcasts, PG tips, but actually what we've been doing off social media would be a good place to start, really. So yeah, obviously I think that the starting point, obviously we did register as a CIC, which is a community interest company, non-for-profit organisation is probably what it's more commonly known as. But we needed to get like the legal entity and the legal function sorted before we can start actually going out into the community and making a difference, or hoping to make a difference.
Why did we have to get the legal entity sorted?
Well, we'd just be a three-man band then, wouldn't we? Just trying to,
Does it legitimise us, yeah?
Yeah, it just obviously legitimises what we're doing. And obviously I think anyone who knows us, we closely linked with Sean's place, and they were originally a CIC. I think they obviously have built and grown, and had to change that a little bit. But, we saw that model. And there is obviously other successful CICs in the city as well. And we've seen that model allows you to, get funded in to be able to go into place and, obviously put on sessions and, allow us to do what we're really passionate about. So yeah, it felt like, and I think as well, just for, I think everything that we've done to this point, we've done all that sort of back work first, if you know what I mean. We've got all the sort of approvals and legal side of things out the way first before doing the sessions, because I think the last thing we'd want to do is go in somewhere, really make an impact, and then have to do this and that stop us. So get all that, I suppose the boring stuff done, get us registered, get bank accounts open, all that sort of stuff, and then, right, we're in a position now where we can start getting into places and delivering the programmes and events that we do.
Excellent. Tom, anything to add? What else have we been up to?
I think the better question would be, what haven't we been up to? I think in the last 8 months that we've been working on this, you've become a digital editor.
Yeah.
Paul's become a graphic designer, website builder. I've done some graphic design. We've done a lot.
Yeah, we're jacks of all trades now, yeah?
Yeah, there's an awful lot we've learned that's new.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. It shows what you can do as well. None of us have any specific skills, qualifications to do any of the things that we've done, but we've managed to build a website, we've built content, we've created podcasts, we've created other social media, and then we're doing what we're actually set up to do as well, which is go out and help people in the community, which is what we all enjoy doing and why we started Pendulum Growth. So it definitely feels like we're in a good place. It's a long slog, definitely, to get to this point. A lot of early mornings, a lot of extra hours in the evening, but it definitely
Ask me wife about that one, yeah.
Mine loves it. Mine loves getting me out chucking me out of bed at 5 on a Saturday morning.
Yeah. Not so much for me, because my wife has to get up with the kids, so fair play to her. What's the future then? What do we want next? What are we planning? What's up next for us?
I think it's building on what we've done so far. So obviously we've made a lot of connections with community groups, charities, and big functions in the city. So, one would be, we went into the probation service last week and we were able to deliver a session. I felt it was really impactful to the participants and to the staff who come along. So I think it's really building on that and, hopefully having, a more of a long-term presence in that environment. We do have coming up a charity that specialises in supporting young people, and again, for me, it'd be a really similar thing to try and make a long-term presence in that sector with that particular charity, but maybe building on that to get it into colleges and schools. That for me is where I'd like this to move to. So I think it's really building on these strong foundations that we've been putting in. And Tom said there, it's a long slog, but it feels like this foundation work, it'll reap benefits in the future. We're doing it now, so we're not going to get caught or trip over things in the future. Mm-hmm. So I think when you read a lot of people about building businesses or building, companies and organisations, that first 6 to 12 months is a lot of this sort of groundwork. And if you don't do it correctly, you're going to have to do it in 2 years, 3 years time. So it's building on that. I think as well, trying to continue to build our online presence, because I understand that a lot of the people that we talk to, we might not be able to get to you physically face to face just yet. So building the podcast, building the social media presence, building, PG tips, because it's one of them things that we have a bit of a buzz about, but we feel like these sort of like small clips and small sort of tips, it could actually help someone. It is something that we enjoy and maybe have a little bit of fun with, but it's stuff that could make a difference. So I'd say that. I think obviously as well, one of the sort of probably more boring ones is securing funding, for the future, to ensure that we're still here in a year's time, 5 years time, and we are making progress with that. But it's, having to think about, we do this because we're passionate about it, but there has to be a lens of, we have to bring funding in to ensure that we're still here and we can make a difference with it. So yeah, they're my things. That's me speaking for Pendulum growth. But Tom, Mark, yourselves, what do you sort of see as the future yourselves?
To be honest, I'm really excited. I think we've had some lovely feedback so far. We've had some great testimonials from the sessions that we've done. Looking forward to the session coming up as well with a sort of young adults charity. And then I don't know, sky's the limit, I guess. I suppose what we really set up to do was just help our community in any way we could. I know that's been through very much through a male lens at the moment. Hoping to, we have worked with a few women, but I'm hoping that this charity, young person's charity, gives us even more reach a little bit. And then after that, it'd be lovely to just continue to get more diversity in the sessions and continue to help in any way we can. So I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about editing new content and sort of learning as we grow. And again, we've had great feedback on the online stuff, which gives us a better reach.
I think that's just a good point. I wanted to mention this during the podcast because anyone who's a regular viewer will notice that you're not in my kitchen today.
Yeah.
And we're in the Smithdown Social Arts Hub. So I think just first of all, just a big thank you to Paul.
Defo.
For letting us obviously use the space today. I thought I'd just get that in there just because it's just before we forget.
I think he's not just letting us use the space. I think he's come at 6 o'clock in the morning. He's set up for us a couple of times and all that kind of stuff. So
big thank you. And obviously I think what we'll do is in the sort of when we post this online, whatever channel it is, we'll obviously link their Instagram and their details as well, just to give them a follow, because it is, a really cool space. If you're interested in any of the events that they put on as well. But obviously the future then, I agree. I think getting into some new environments would be nice as well. We do feel confident speaking to men, but also, young people, that'll be a new challenge for us. So we need to obviously think about how we approach that in the best way, but also, we're going to support women as well along this journey as well. I'm happy to do that because, a lot of the conversations and things that we talk through, we don't think these are male specific.
No. Maybe
issues or, potential habits or, plans that we can help with. We feel it'll help a lot of people, not just men. So
yeah. We're not really aiming at gender or race or anything like that. No. The more the merrier, I suppose. Yeah. So it's a really good message. Anything to end on, Tom, before we get into the topic at hand?
I think the main thing is just reach and impact, isn't it? The things that we're talking about, the things that we're producing content around, the things that we've had to go looking for ourselves, whether it was during our late teens, 20s, 30s, it's information and different techniques and strategies that aren't being presented to people, where people are being taught this in school or later education or even in the workplace. So it's all new for a lot of people that we speak to. So I'm quite confident that's going to continue to be the case when we sit down with people. It's going to be something that maybe they've not had the time to think about, or they haven't given themselves that time or had that time around the rest of the commitments that they have. So yeah, that for me, it's spreading this information that we've obtained ourselves and then implemented and practiced it, and hopefully we can continue to get the same kind of feedback and reaction that we've had so far, because it's been really positive, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. I suppose before we end then, I think the last thing to say is, if you're really interested in any of our sessions, whether it's on visualization, the momentum sessions, or the other sessions that we've got coming up where you can build real tools in your life, you can find us on our website, and we'll put that in the detail below. And you can reach out for a 30-minute free consultation with us to talk about what we can do for you. I think it's really important to put that in there and underline it.
Yeah, 100%. If it's you as an individual, or you represent business, organisation, charity, happy to have a chat about how we can go in and help and support. And we are very flexible in terms of the content that we can deliver. We're working on new projects all the time, and trying to adopt and adapt these things so it reaches all audiences. So yeah, please do reach out on the website or via social media. We'll be happy to have a chat and take it from there.
Perfect. Right, let's get into it, lads. Masculinity, big topic. We've been debating it, discussing it, looking at stuff for the last couple of weeks. Where do we start? What's the definition of masculinity, or what defines masculinity, do you think?
For me, for what I've taken a look into, what my understanding has been for some time now, is it really is the expectations of men. So expectations around their behaviour, their traits, their standing and place within society, within, I suppose, the family unit, and those around you as well. So how you behave with your friends, with your partner. And that's where I've landed now in terms of what I feel masculinity is. It's essentially the expectations of men.
Mm-hmm.
So for ourselves, as people can probably tell who are listening and watching, we are 3 men. So I think one way for us to really break it down would be to look at the expectations of ourselves and of each other, as well. And I think that then will transfer across to them what we probably expect from the other men around us in society as well.
Okay.
So that's where it is for me. How about yourself?
Tricky one, isn't it? Because it means a lot to different people, and it's a potentially triggering topic as well. I think, from just what we look at, it's qualities or attributes which are associated with men and boys. That's you look in the dictionary, you're going to get something quite similar to that. And I think if we can stick to that and then use our own experience, that's the best way for us to have a good conversation about this. And I think for me, it's something which has probably evolved over time, and as you gain experience in life, it does change what you expect of a man. And it's sometimes not until you put on the spot and have a think about it that you realise that you can just sort of drift through your life doing things. But actually, do I do this because I'm a man, that I have a home now and I feel like I have to protect my castle and all this sort of business? So yeah, something that's, I think, quite a complex conversation, but I'm glad that we're going to get into it today and what I'd say is probably 3 unique perspectives on it as well. Because I know in the prep for this, even though we probably are, giving you a bit of a confidence boost here, Mark, in the same sort of age bracket. There's not a huge, there's not a huge gap between us really, but there is different life experiences, and maybe just different interpretations of it really. So yeah, for me, it's the qualities and attributes that we associate with men.
Mm-hmm.
What about yourself?
When I was like sort of trying to think about it, look online, it became a little bit overwhelming, the idea of masculinity, because and I think I mentioned the Bill Bailey joke at the time, and I just sort of said, when someone asked it, are you a man? Men tend to go, like panic a little bit. What is man? What is, nobility and, conquering all he surveys and all this? But if he says to you, are you a bloke? And you go, oh yeah, I'm a bloke, yeah. Bloke just sort of keeps his head down, goes to the pub, he's pays for his round, all that kind of stuff. And I think of masculinity a little bit in the same breadth of that, which is, it's this all-encompassing ideal to some people and all that kind of stuff. But and I think we spoke about it yesterday, and Tom, you boiled it down to expectations of man, and I thought, oh, that's a lot more manageable. What are my expectations of me, and what were the expectations of the men in my life a little bit? And I think we're going to get into that in a second and talk about who our role models were on TV, maybe when we were growing up, and which I'm really excited for, because I'm sure there's going to be wrestling and all kinds in there. But also our ideals.
Not us wrestling, but no,
yeah, well maybe. And our ideals and the sort of role models that we had in our day-to-day lives and stuff like that. And I think once you start looking at it on that grounded level, I think, it's not like a set of like ethereal principles. It's a grounding of stuff. And I think one of the other things that you called out, Paul, I think we'll get into as well, is there's some things that we think of as masculine, but they're not exclusively masculine traits. There's a lot of women in our lives, and especially I'm going to talk about my mum at some point as well. People who demonstrate those principles of protect, those principles of hard work and all that, just, although we've probably lined them up traditionally with masculine roles, they're probably equally feminine. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's, I suppose, in a nutshell, that's where I sort of landed as well. I think I'm glad we kept calibrating on it, because I think, Paul, I think you said deliberately you were staying away from some research online and all that kind of stuff, because you wanted to come with your opinion. And I think one of the problems I had was I looked at so many articles that after a while I just wanted to lay down in a dark room.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in a nutshell, like you said, expectations. So let's get into it then. Let's talk about role models maybe. First of all, I'm dead excited to talk about who your role models were growing up, first of all, on TV, and why. What kind of masculinity did it display? What kind of things did you take away from it? Whether it was conscious or maybe not, in your subconscious. Paul, I'm going to ask you first.
Yeah, so you've hinted at it really. Wrestling was probably the big one for me, probably alongside football as well. But obviously with wrestling, it's very vascular, it's very testosterone and probably all the sorts of chemicals flowing through their veins. But you had fellas like Steve Austin, The Rock, Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, all, probably legitimate physical athletes as well, but in this arena where they were doing superhuman things and things that you could only imagine of when you're growing up. And obviously at that point as well, you don't know whether it's predetermined beforehand, do you? So you do.
It's not, is it?
World exclusive, yeah. Sorry.
Oh God.
Yeah, letting you peek behind the curtain there, mate. That it's all decided beforehand. But yeah, it was probably the fact that they were doing impossible things and impossible strength, and watching it back now, it's all the commentators egging it on and hyping it up. That's what you fed into. So probably like a lot of that. And I had cousins and friends who were a little bit older than me as well. So they were really into it as well. So you followed them. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry, Tom. Your notes have
gone for a bit.
Gone west there. So things like that. And when I think of football as well, even though I was a big Everton fan, there wasn't much to cheer about. So you did like Duncan Ferguson, but you'd probably look at people like Alan Shearer, Roy Keane, who, again, you see them now quite stoic, quite still full of aggression and passion. And it was men like that you looked at. Wrong. It feels bad saying it, but you didn't always immediately maybe look at your dad or the men who were in your life, because you're very impressionable as a child. So you look at who's in your video games or who's on the TV, or when you were going to the football, who caught your eyes, this imposing figure of
who's doing the incredible as opposed to who's doing the credible work.
Yeah, that's it. You don't look at your dad sort of getting you dressed every day and taking you to football and taking you to school and looking after you and taking you out at the weekend. You don't look at that as a child. You look at as you say, the impossible. So that is probably a bit of a whistle-stop tour, mate, of my my childhood there.
So just pulling out a few, I mean, Stone Cold is one that I know, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you know I'm not a big sports guy, but I do know Duncan Ferguson is, and a few others there. What were the key attributes you think that you were picking up on, whether either it was consciously or not, from them as a kid? 'Cause Stone Cold's big, strong, isn't he? I know Duncan's, is he tall? He's quite tall. Duncan Ferguson, is he quite an imposing figure, but not maybe as muscly. So what is it? What are you picking up on?
I think for me, like strength, assertiveness, leaders, because ultimately with the wrestlers, they were all like the champions. They were always the ones who were in the top positions. And Duncan Ferguson didn't win a lot with Everton, but he was a captain. He was a leader. He scored in derby games. They were big moments. And then if you look at the other footballers we're talking about there, sorry, this probably will happen a lot as we're getting used to the new equipment.
It's okay.
They were winners, record holders. They were people at the forefront. Probably that's what I'd probably take from it. They weren't the people in the background. They were the people at the front of what was going on. So that's probably what I'd take from that, mate.
Comfortable with shouldering stress and not really showing
on
it.
The challenges,
taking on the challenges, and winning. How about you, Tom? Then
I think from me childhood, the two stand out for me in terms of what if we say we watch through the TV screen and through movies. I'd probably go with James Bond.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
It's quite a straightforward one for me. I've watched GoldenEye since the age of, I think I was 5 or 6 when that come out.
That makes me feel so old.
And that's still my favourite James Bond. And you watch that and, you know, he's brave, he's heroic, drives the flash cars. You know, he's in good physical shape, as they have to be, these MI5 agents. And he was definitely one. You play the video game, you know, you turn the corner and you have you go on
the karate chop.
All that kind of stuff. You play out the intro in your living room with your toy gun or whatever you get for Christmas, don't you?
Yeah.
So James Bond's one. And then the second one, who probably the most prominent voice in my childhood, probably Jeremy Clarkson.
Yeah.
I've watched, again, massive Top Gear fan. I was introduced to cars and Top Gear at a very young age through my dad, and that's probably the voice I've heard more of throughout my childhood and teenage years than any other voice, I would say. Summer holidays, you'd sit and watch Top Gear. Me and my brother on the couch, we'd watch Top Gear from dawn till dusk. Obviously, we'd get out for a little bit if it was sunny, but on rainy days, we'd watch Top Gear. And I think with Jeremy Clarkson, he's outspoken. He's got a big physical presence, but also a big character as well. Successful, and fun. I think with that as well, the three of them in Top Gear, that kind of almost like a brotherhood, isn't it? That they are like, when you see them, that's all you think.
Yeah.
When you're a child, you think Jeremy Clarkson just goes around with Richard Hammond and James May, and that's his life. You don't really know much about. Yeah. He's got a partner, children, other things going on. It's just, you see these three fellas travelling the world, having a great time, having opinions and having a laugh. And I suppose that was my first masculine impression through the television, I would say.
That's really fascinating, because I think there's a couple of things there, isn't it? So first of all, James Bond, I'd just take that he's had to, as a character, change. Because essentially there's been masculine traits he's demonstrated maybe in the 60s that seemed maybe reasonable at the time, maybe not. Don't want to get into that too much. Yeah. But he's had to,
probably outdated now.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. But I think he's had to evolve and change. Yeah. And I think we're probably going to get on to the difference between maybe a classic, or classic's not the right word, but what am I looking for? Like traditional masculinity, yes, spot on, versus a modern masculinity, which is, I think, maybe going to link in with how I think we have some expectations of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just tell you mine really quickly, and I appreciate you putting us in the same age bracket, but as Tom clearly pointed out, he was only 5 or 6 when GoldenEye came out, and I was pretty much
in
uni.
That, mate,
yeah, thank you.
Don't want to mislead the viewers. You know?
I'm going to have to do some heavy special effects to get us in the same sort of age bracket, I think. But also, my role model growing up, and this is going to date me a little bit as well, is Mr. T, B.A. Baracus from the A-Team. Mm-hmm. So I dressed as him. Like when we were in nursery and stuff like that, my mum made me a little denim waistcoat. I had a little skull cap with a Mohican. I didn't dress as him every day. It was just for like fancy dress and stuff like that. But I used to go around doing the voice of Peru the Fool, all of that kind of stuff. And I even saw him. He came to Liverpool in pantomime one year and stuff like that, which was a big deal for me. And he had a similar stuff to that, all the wrestlers. Big, imposing. He could, well, actually, he didn't have a load of bravado in the show. B.A. Baracus was quite, he was the kind of guy who'd only deal with stuff when stuff was like, if you push him, he'll push back, kind of thing. That was B.A. And he also helped the kids, so you'd always see him in impoverished areas.
Isn't there a song?
Yeah, oh yeah, he had the whole separate sort of cartoon where he was with a load of young gymnasts and stuff.
The one called Treat Your Mother Right?
Treat Your Mother Right, yeah. So he even very early on, he was very aware of being a role model for kids. And I don't know if that consciously sunk in, but he seemed like a good guy. Mm-hmm. He didn't seem like, with Stone Cold, I guess, a little bit. You know, he not that he was a bad guy, but he was like an anti-hero, wasn't he? He was like, I drank a beer, I drank another beer, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. All that kind of stuff. Mr. T, like, B.A. Baracus drank milk. Do you know what I mean? It was really concerted effort to be pitched towards kids. He obviously famously didn't get on no planes and all that kind of stuff. But I just think it was really interesting time. And it was a really interesting sort of character to take some stuff away, because even then it was like, look after your community, look after your mum, you know, treat younger people right, anyone who's vulnerable. And also, you know, the nature of the A-Team, they went around helping people. That was what they did. They go to a community, it's usually a local business owner was in some kind of trouble from a big corporation or a big set of gangsters or something. So they'd always help the little guy. And I know, you know, we say it's obviously like predetermined, like wrestling, all that kind of stuff. This sounds
like the new wing of Pendulum Growth in a few years' time.
Mate, I'm telling you, get me in a garage with a welder and, you know, a van and all that. Let's see what happens. But yeah, so I think that's when we're going to be talking about masculinity. We're going to be talking about that. Okay, just a quick sweep around the room then. Let's talk about the real world role models. They're not the people who lift people up and throw them over bars and, you know, all of that kind of stuff, but the people who are there every day. Give us your role models in a traditional sense.
I think without, you know, sort of naming names, because you wouldn't want to embarrass people, but like I just look at the people in my life who are raising children right now, who are looking after family members who are unwell. Like, these are probably more like traits and behaviours that I look at and think. And again, they can be universal. There is women in my life who are doing these, but when I look at the men, they're doing this because that's what we're going to talk about today. But people who are ambitious, running businesses, getting up early, chasing goals, you know, that sort of stuff for me, making a difference in the community, whether that is doing work like what we're doing or just in everyday actions, you know, by trying to help people in the best way they can. They're the things that come to me right now that I look at and think, yeah, I can gravitate towards that. I hope that I can do more of that. I hope, you know, one day when I have a son or daughter, that they'll pick up on some of these behaviours.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tom?
Very, very similar, really. I think a key thing to point out, I agree with everything Paul said there. Everything that he's outlined is free. To demonstrate masculinity, I think, to be a good man in terms of what we're looking at and discussing, it's all free, and it's all made up of traits that you can replicate. I think that's an important point that we're gonna, you know, we're not, maybe we will name a few people, but the people that we look at as demonstrating masculinity, the things that we point to that are positive, are things that we can replicate and things that we can take into our own lives. And I think that's really important of when you're looking at role models, it's finding the parts of them that you can then take into your own life and look to build on and look to implement, and that's so crucial. I think I've written a few names down, and what I've tried to do is think of people I've actually spent time with, people who you've met, people you've interacted with, you might have participated in certain events or fundraising with them. And if you just keep your role models to people online who you've never really met, are you really that sure that you're looking up to people who are right for you? So I don't think you need to look far for role models either, especially in Liverpool, in the city we live, and then you've got like the border in Manchester, Lancashire, places like that. You don't need to look too far, I don't think, for role models, particularly in terms of masculinity, men doing great things in the community, in their own lives, for the families. There's plenty on our doorstep to take a look at.
Fascinating. I'm going to call out, for me, my uncle was a big role model for me, and by extension his father, my grandfather. I think we may have talked about this before, but my father wasn't around when I was growing up, and these two people naturally stepped in one sense or another. My grandfather first, in a more traditional sense, is like a fatherly figure, giving me advice. I lived with him till I was 9 with my mum. He was, all of those traditional things that you think of as, he was stoic. He didn't talk necessarily about everything that was going on inside of him, but he was reliable. He was always there. One thing I always remember, and I always think this is a wonderful masculine trait, and when do you inherit this, or how do you get this, is just naturally good with his hands. He could just build things from scratch. He could repair things. He built sheds in the back garden, but with no map, or he didn't go and buy a shed kit and put it together. He just cut pieces of wood until it was a shed shape. You're like, how does he even do that? How do you even acquire those skills? And he was a man who was he was a paratrooper, all that kind of stuff, and just a strong man. His son sort of naturally took up that role with me, especially after my granddad sort of passed away. In my teenage years, he gave me taste in music and stuff like that, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on who you think. But he was a big fan of the Jam and Oasis and all that kind of stuff, and I followed in his footsteps. And then he was a firefighter, and now he's a retired firefighter. He works in the community, as a caretaker and driver and everything all rounded in a school for kids with special needs and stuff like that. And he's the patriarch of the family. He kind of pulls everything together a little bit. A lot of stuff rests on his shoulders. He helps me support me mum, and he just fixes things, and he's that guy where I haven't been. I was like, how do I do this? How do I drill this hole? How do I figure this out? And he'll come round and he'll do all of that. So he's reliable, I think, he's there for you, that kind of thing, and I can always trust him. It's nice to have that safety net and feel protected a little bit. And it's something I always I never take it for granted at all. So I think I suppose this will give us, we've got conservatively about 25 minutes now to get into those actual attributes then of masculinity. What do we think of? And what are we going to put into maybe traditional masculinity as what I'm thinking about? What are we going to put into modern masculinity? Maybe the masculinity that we're taking forward. And where does it overlap with femininity and stuff like that? Because I'm really interested in that as well. So let's get started. What are your classic attributes of masculinity, do you think?
I think you've just alluded to one there when you were speaking, mate, and I think being able to create a safe environment, and not just physically. I suppose the physically is where you're talking about the more traditional masculinity, where you'd look to be physically capable. There will be that element of aggression when needed, but also creating a safe environment where people feel safe in your space,
your presence,
where they can express themselves, whether they can speak honestly, speak openly, be vulnerable. I think particularly with all three of us have partners, I think you have to have created an environment where your partner can feel vulnerable, and if they're troubled or they have issues going on at the moment, they know that they can speak to you about it, and one, that you'll listen, and two, that you'll do your very, very best if there is guidance to be given or some form of advice or verbal support, you will do your absolute best in that space as well. So that's one of the big ones for me. I think you always know when you're around a top fella, you feel like you can be yourself. You know, there's no judgment, there's no element of feeling like you're being imposed upon. That for me is such a crucial one. I think that's when you can tell you're around a good masculine man.
That's interesting, that for me. I think, because I think there's a couple of things that almost move from traditional to what I'd think is modern. You know, interested in your opinion. Traditional safety in a physical sense, but actually now modern masculinity is creating that safety of the mind, that psychological safety. The second thing is almost, I'd say that the traditional masculine male was quite dominant, but whereas the new masculine, or hopefully the new modern masculinity, is creating a version of being so safe and comfortable with yourself that others feel the same to do so around you. You know, you were saying that, a top fella, a top bloke. You smiled as well, so I think there's people in your head that you're thinking of when you're saying that a little bit, where you think, I can be myself, I can say how I feel. I don't have to put on a bravado. You don't have to do that thing where you sort of, you know, I was going to say a bit of machismo, like a bit of, you know, having to put your shoulders back and sort of all that kind of stuff. That's fascinating to me, that. Paul, what are your thoughts?
I think when we think of the, you know, stereotypical, like, traditional masculinity, it's strength, courage, leadership, assertiveness, which, and I think this is a good point, or it's a good moment to talk about this point. I actually don't think some of them qualities, or all them qualities, are actually bad things. Mm-hmm. And I actually think them qualities can be used in modern masculinity. Mm-hmm. I think where we all agree on, and we all sort of probably have, you know, a disagreement with, is that when they're used to the extreme. So if strength is taken to the extreme, assertiveness, I'd put dominance in that point as well. Yeah. When that's taken to an extreme, that is when that is, you know, is unacceptable. So I think that's the caveat we want to make with some of these points, is that we do understand that some of them taken to far too to one side are not right. I think one that was good that we spoke about yesterday is that there's a lot of men who will, you know, believe in being stoic, which, you know, to the viewers who don't know what that is, it's, you know, it is that sort of inner strength and reflecting on things and learning from past mistakes. And generally that will lead you to being a little bit more isolated and by yourself. But again, if you take that to an extreme where you completely cut off, we don't subscribe to that as being something which is positive either.
No, in fact, it's one of the things that they're talking about and have talked about probably for the last 15 years, where they're saying men need to open up and talk more. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, no, we do, and it probably is one of our taglines that we do agree with men open up and talking, but it's got to be a little bit more than that as well. We've got to have action, we've got to have other behaviours and habits that fit in alongside that to truly thrive. So yeah, I think that traditional view, I wouldn't say it's completely outdated, but we do need to probably update it and make some tweaks to it. I think the protection one as well is probably one which is interesting as well to us, because it takes up many forms. It's not purely a physical aggressive side of things as well. Protection can just be, you know, feeling safe in your own home, feeling safe in the company of a man. Mm-hmm. Because I know, and again, I can't speak for women, but when I've spoken to the women in my life, they all have a different story or experience with that I can't relate to. But we have to be aware of it, that it is something that's out there. Yeah. So I think providing protection and safety is something for me, which again is traditional, but it probably looks different today in terms of how we, you know, how we demonstrate that. Yeah. So yeah, I think there is things that we can take, but we need to obviously just be a little bit more agile with it. I think one for me as well, probably a final one, and you mentioned it there when you were speaking about your uncle, is that for me, I feel the ability to be able to deal with trauma or deal with difficult situations and setbacks in your life and being able to move forward with it. But by that, I don't mean just putting it to the back of your mind. It's addressing it, accepting it, doing the work that you have to do, which can be different for everybody, but doing the work that you have to do to then be able to manage it and move forward. Because I am very conscious with something like trauma, you can't just switch that off. If you've got a diagnosed mental health condition, you can't just switch that off. But it's getting the help and support that you need to be able to move forward and manage it well. And, in some cases, we probably might get into who our sort of modern day role models are. The people that I look at have been able to take that and use it as something which is now positive. I feel, without blowing smoke up our own backsides, it's what we're trying to do with Pendulum. It's come from a passion. It's come from our own setbacks and the challenge that we've dealt with. That's why we're here, and that's why we're trying to make a difference.
Yeah, wonderful. Tom, anything to add on that?
No, nothing to add on that particular point. No, I think I've got a list of a quite a good few, to be honest, in terms of traits and behaviours, and they all, a lot of them overlap and intertwine, and I think one will feed into the other as well. But one I've put there, which again feeds into some of the things we've already took, is being physically capable. For me, my expectations of myself as a man, you two as business partners, is to be physically capable. And we talk about protection, and when I say being physically capable, it's not about how you look. It's not about, how much you can put on a squat rack or dumbbell curl. It's being physically capable.
I'm glad you said that, by the way, Tom. Thank you.
I have seen them judging eyes when we haven't put as much on the squat rack. Yeah.
It's nothing about that. It's not about how you perform in the gym, but it's being able to be confident that if a situation was to arise where somebody needed support or saving, or you needed to save yourself as well, you'd be physically capable to do that. One thing I always think of, and I've spoke to you lads about this before, is if I go hiking, if I'm out 4 mile away from my car in the hills with my partner and she falls and breaks her ankle, can I carry her back to the car? If I'm with my mate and his child, for instance, and something was to happen, can I carry one of them? If you're in a car accident, a burning building, somebody needs pulling up, you need to pull yourself out of a situation. Can you do that? And I think for me, that is something that motivates me to then go and do the exercise and the training that we do. It's not about looking good on the beach or whether my missus thinks I'm looking good at the minute. It's if I end up in a situation where physical capability is needed, can I then be the man? I suppose, in traditional sense, am I going to be the one if there's a kid who's fallen down, something needs pulling up, can I do that? Because I'd hate to be in the position where I'm a man in that kind of situation and I'm helpless.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that is a very traditional sense, isn't it? And obviously it's probably worth noting as well, there's probably people who aren't able to do that for whatever reasons.
Yeah.
But I see that you carry that as an attribute, and we see that probably every day, mate. And if we're talking about pulling yourself up out of things, I think you're the one who does the pull-ups at the moment, but it's certainly something I look to try and emulate in the future. So what else have we got there then? What other so for me, what fascinates me is this overlap with actual like feminine traits and stuff like that, because I think we've talked about creating a safe space, a place for empathy, all of that kind of stuff. Empathy is traditionally aligned with femininity. Yeah. Women we know are much more adept, have built the tools, and usually have the tools much earlier to go through and talk about problems. And it's something that I think men traditionally, historically, I guess, and stereotypically haven't had the same ability to do. Mm-hmm. And again, thinking about hard work and, taking ownership. I was raised by my mum, single parent family. My mum worked unbelievably hard. She worked hard, she played hard, that kind of stuff. She was a nurse. She'd work probably a ridiculous amount of hours when I think about it. A 5-day week and then 2 nights, which is insane, isn't it? 70-hour week at least. And there's elements of that where she's sort of had to maybe be a bit of a role modeling where you'd maybe look towards your father, or traditionally, and when I say I've got to caveat everything with, we're talking about traditional masculinity. My mum's demonstrated that. Mm-hmm. So what other traits do we think either overlap or are traditionally masculine that we think could probably need a clean up or a change in modernisation?
Just with the femininity side of things, one thing I'd like to do, just because I don't know if you have looked at the traits of what the traditional I think we've spoken about the traditional stereotypical traits of masculinity, but the ones of femininity.
Yeah, all right.
And just to see what you think about it. So I think you've mentioned one there. So empathy is one. Gracefulness. When I think of gracefulness, I think someone who's light on the feet and can dance. So I wouldn't say I'm graceful. Humility, sensitivity, intuition, nurturing, gentle, expressive, wise, patient, emotional, and flexible. So they're your ones that, again, that's just a Google search and just taking the ones that seem most appropriate. But I'd argue that there's a lot of them there that I would expect a man to be able to express and to be able to handle. And I think this is where, when I've reflected, when I look right now at the men, whether it's in my immediate sort of network of people or the people who sit outside that, they demonstrate some of these more traditional masculine traits, but they can also as well demonstrate the feminine traits as well. And it doesn't make me think any less of them, because I think that was something that was probably levelled at people in the past, is that if you express some of these more feminine, traditional stereotype traits, you're less of a man. Mm-hmm. You're a wuss, you're this, you're that, all the sort of, dated terms we can think of, that's what they were. And I think for me, to bring it to life, one that I always mention to you guys is Kevin Sinfield, who is, rugby league legend, captain of Leeds Rhinos, won everything there was to win, aggressive, leader, stubborn, hard as nails on the pitch. You watch him and you think, oh, he's horrible, him. Look at him now and what he's doing for his friend Rob Burrows, running all the marathons in multiple days and all the fundraising, the £1 million that he's raised for motor neuron disease. Watch him talk about him. Crying his eyes out, showing his vulnerable side, showing his sensitivity to it. And it's a man who's still in the game as well, by the way. He's a coach, so he will still have to demonstrate some of them more traditional masculine behaviours with someone who's got a clear handling, a great balance of both. But we look up to and think, no less of a man. That to me is what the modern man is. And another one people probably know is Ashley Kane, who had the unfortunate and one of the worst situations you have in your life, where his daughter had cancer and died at a very young age. But before that, phenomenal sports career, but cut short. So able to deal with adversity. He has further adversity of his daughter dying. Can be really open about that, and openly cries about it to this day. And I think that's fine. That we should allow people to do that and show that vulnerability. But then on the other hand as well, is an absolute phenomenal athlete and doing crazy fundraising events. He kayaks marathons every day. So again, I think the idea that I'm getting at is we've got modern men who are taking attributes from both and actually are probably stronger for it. In my opinion, they're more well-rounded to deal with the modern world that we're in. Because I think if you're two on either side, you're going to struggle, or you're going to have quite big flaws. So yeah, that's what I think of. That's where the sort of crossover is, if we can blend the two. And the thing that I'm conscious of there is, we've mentioned a little bit, there is a lot of sports related examples that we use in here. There'd be plenty of other men out who sit outside that arena who are demonstrating both as well. Like I feel, again, not to blow smoke up your arse, man, you're not a big sportsman, but I'd like to think that you demonstrate both them sides of behaviours of what you've been through this year, with the things that, with your work, outside of work, what you've done with your weight loss, what you've done with the gym. This is a very impromptu, building up a market. I should have said this to him, when we're not filming, really. But I think, you know, I just want to make the point that we might use men who are, you know, in sport, because that's, you know, what we're probably more naturally, you know, sort of the information that we take in. But other men who've got different interests will show it in, you know, in different ways as well. So yeah, that's for me where the overlap is, mate, with today and the masculine and feminine sort of traits.
Appreciate that, mate. Thank you very much. But I think adversity is huge, isn't it? I think we're talking about how you deal with the challenges of life, whether they be big or small, can define you.
Just so you know, we have a fortitude session that we're building at the moment,
yes.
which goes all through this stuff.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Back to your point.
A great little mini advert there. No, I think that's fascinating. I think
a little jingle behind that, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. Fortitude is a great word, isn't it? It means to sort of build up and sort of armour yourself or armour something. And I think, you know, there's elements of what you've both talked about, key themes that are running through both. You can be strong of character in not necessarily a physical strength. It could be a strength of being courageous under pressure, being courageous in difficult situations, staring, I suppose, without being too dramatic, into the abyss a little bit, looking at the darkness and sort of dealing with it, accepting it for whatever it is. You know, you talked about some difficult situation, incredibly difficult. The loss of a child is just, I can't even think about it sometimes, because it just, in fact, weirdly, and this is impromptu as well, yesterday I happened upon an advert of a child choking, and his parents sort of panicking in the moment, and it was an advert for this sort of choking device for children and stuff like that. The emotion of it struck me so hard yesterday that I had to go online and learn the Heimlich maneuver, and then I had to teach my wife it last night. And just say, this is how you do it, this is how you put your thumb in your fist, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Because the idea of not being prepared for that situation absolutely terrifies me. It's very quick in the advert. And when I say it's an advert, it's a recording from a family thing. And the kid starts choking. Within 30 seconds, he's on his knees because he's nearly passing out. Within a minute, he's on the floor. And it was just the anxiety it struck in me was really palpable. And I thought, when you're talking, Paul and Tom, about adversity, being capable in those situations, it's almost about thinking ahead a little bit, whether it's emotionally, physically, whatever. I think a very masculine trait is like planning for the worst, hoping for the best, maybe a little bit. So fortitude is about how do you build yourself now for hopefully things that don't never come, but may do. Yeah. And I think that's a traditionally masculine trait. I know obviously there's absolutely a feminine overlap, and maybe even, you know, I just thinking about my mum alone, she obviously had to think ahead financially, because that's another form of safety, and she had to think ahead in terms of that making the house safe with the money that she had and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, we had help from my granddad and my uncle, but fundamentally she had to just step up and do some things and make things up as she went along, because there are these things that I always joke about that happen in my life, which sometimes my wife just turns to me and it's like, okay, can you do this? And I've never done it before. And the only reason I think she's turning to me is because that's traditionally my role. You know, it's fascinating. There's just certain things that you just end up having to do as a dad or a husband. Where you like,
well, you've had the caravan, haven't you? So I'd imagine with that, there's probably tons of activity.
Things that no one tells you, that you sort of just have to learn by osmosis and deal with in the moment, and just sort of, there's no, it's stupid, but there's no kind of pressure like turning up to a campsite for the first time and loads of tourer owners watching you unhitch and set up your caravan.
Getting the popcorn out.
Oh, all that, yeah. But what happens sometimes, and I find this, even there, fellas drift over and sort of go, do you need Dan there? Do you need... And it happened 3 or 4 times. My first time camping or in the Tourette, this is again impromptu, fella came up, kept giving me advice all the way through. He said, if you want me to help you in any way, let me know. Because he was next door and he was always out on his chair. I just asked him questions. He was dead happy to answer. And at the end, almost like a presentation that I'd leveled up as like a dad, caravan owner, he come and presented me with a piece like for my drill that allowed me to put the legs down a lot quicker. He said, I've got a spare one of these, you can have it. I thought, wow, that's lovely.
I thought you were going to say you got like the best newcomer award.
Yeah.
Of, you know,
it's
the
a mini gold
site.
caravan on a plinth, and he just came over and he offered it to me. But I just, and I found out he was a scout leader as well. So his kids had grown up, and he was still a scout leader. He was still involved, and he did it when he was kids, when he had kids in the scouts, and then he continued to do it. Again, that's just it's a bit of a role model, bit of a helping hand, bit of guidance. He had all of those things we're talking about. He wasn't pushy, he wasn't overly dominant. He didn't come over and go, this is how you do it, son, and all this kind of stuff. He just went, you need help, I'm here. Because he's been through it. And I think that's something that we're thinking about when we're going out into the community in Pendulum. We've been through these situations. We're not just, we're not just espousing stuff and talking about stuff that we haven't had to address ourselves, either within ourselves or within the community when we started helping people. And I think, and I'm not, this doesn't come round to us going, yeah, we're super masculine. This is why, this is why we've talked about this.
Whole Hogan style as we finish.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. That. But I think it's really important, isn't it? Helping your community, helping the people, the guy next to you, the girl next to you, the woman next to you, the man next to you, just whoever. Maybe seeing that and going, I can help you, but how do I help? What's the interaction I need to do?
It's an awareness of others, isn't it? An awareness of what's going on around you.
Yeah.
And I think that to get to that place in itself, there needs to be an awful lot of things already in place to be able to do that. If you're not taking good care of yourself and what's going on in your own home, it's going to be very, very difficult then to provide yourself as a resource for your community. So that I think is the cherry on the cake for me, when you see people who are given time for the community, setting up organisations, providing, full days of their own time to give back. When I see that, and it won't be the case for everyone, there'll be people who are doing that who've got terrible home lives and probably really poor relationships, but from the ones I see, I tend to see them doing these things. I'll see how they interact with the partner and the children. And it's usually those people who are out there in the community, who the ones that I've got on my list of people are all doing great things in the community on a quite a broad scale. But then I've seen them with the families as well. They've all got daughters, so I've seen them interact with the daughters as well. And I think you see, men doing great things in the community, they come across as very strong, very confident and assertive. I think you get that picture, but then when you also then see them interacting with a young child and the partner, that's when it really comes together for me. And I go, yeah, I want to take a closer look at that person and see what I can bring across. But that selflessness, I think, is definitely there. And I think it's being selfless, providing for others, giving as much as you can within reason to other people, but then also that willingness to take and accept as well. I know there's periods for me where I've been give, and just that refusal to take help, refusal to take a bit of guidance. If you feel like your missus is talking to you about a topic that maybe is more in line with what you see as a young lad and a man, but just listening, take things when you need them, and acknowledge when you do need to take a bit as well. I think that's hugely important. That's definitely more in the more modern masculine side. We're all dealing now with an endless list of things. Yourself, the 2 kids, the caravan, the missus.
Yeah,
we both work an awful lot. We've got full-time jobs, Pendulum. We're trying to get fitter and stronger. We're trying to educate ourselves. If we think that we're going to just go cruising through that all on our own without taking a little bit of help that's offered to us or asking for some help along the way, we're a bit deluded, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea of the male who's completely self-reliant, who's an island, I think is probably one of the past. Probably like thinking about James Bond, even like when we're talking about that traditional, original James Bond, Sean Connery's James Bond, Ian Fleming's James Bond, was probably a bit of that. But actually, as he's grown and developed, you've seen that he has more emotional sides. The most successful sort of Bond is the guy who has really deep relationships with women and is, you know, the people around him and stuff like that. I just think it's really interesting because I think different shades of masculinity is reflected through Bond in the different years and stuff like that. So, lad, we're getting nearly up to the 1 hour mark and stuff like that, so we're going to have to bring it to a close shortly, but I'd be interested in your takeaway from today's session. Like, what are you going to either carry into the future, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, or what have you taken away from the conversation that we've had today? I'm gonna go to Paul first because he's looking really thoughtful, and then I'll come to you, Tom.
Thoughtful, or what do I say next?
Panic.
Sort of panic phase. I think obviously what we've just been talking about there, the willingness to accept help, is something that I've had to work on over, you know, a number of years now. And I think it's, you know, to Tom's point there, I could have people, and probably would be my partner, and I just think I'm not going to listen. I know enough, you know, about that situation, and it's knowing when the time is, no, I need to be all ears here and be a better listener and listen to what she's saying, because there will be, you know, there'll be value in that. Again, it's someone who probably knows me better than anybody else, the person who I live with, person who loves me. It's coming from a place of love, so listen to it. And I think, like, one thing that, you know, we're all conscious of is when we're doing this, we want to walk the walk. We don't want to be saying to people that you need to have really close people around you and you should listen to them when it hits a nerve. It's probably because it's true. We need to live and breathe that ourselves as well. So for me, that's one thing that I've worked on, I am continuing to work on, and something that I will, you know, take forward. One thing for me is that we've spoke a lot today about masculinity, but I'd like to say a lot of these traits for me, I think, are transferable whoever you are, whoever's listening. Is that I feel to be someone who's courageous, who's a leader, someone who's in touch with their emotions, someone who can be vulnerable. That can be a man or a woman. I don't think these are exclusive to gender.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, that's one thing I'd like to say. What else is there? Let's have a little bit of a think. What else would I like to become better at? I think, you know, there's times when we can all be a little bit selfish, and I'm guilty of it. And I'd like to probably be more giving in some ways. You know, I can give out time to do Pendulum stuff, and I think that's something that's quite selfless. But then at times outside of that, I probably am a little bit more selfish. So probably to be a little bit more less selfish in some of these other moments, like if someone needs help, just give them help. You know, don't hesitate, just go and do it. I think we can probably get in our own heads sometimes and think, oh, I don't want to do this because they might not want help, or they just offer it. Mm-hmm. And if they say no, they say no. And I think I'd rather have that no than going away and thinking, oh God, I should have helped that person when they maybe needed it. And that's, you know, whether it's in work or just in the everyday stuff that we see. I think I can probably just shy away from it sometimes and think they probably don't want an imposing male to come over and tell them what to do. So maybe try and get a little bit more comfortable with doing that, mate. That's probably something that I'd say I'd like to take forward.
Fascinating. Tom? As Paul said, everything you want to say?
As he always does, mate.
Nothing is notes.
When you're joined at the hip, that happens a lot. I think, just to echo Paul's point, I think I've written a list of traits, and probably the two of the people who come to mind when I read all these, Act 3 actually, are all the women in my life. I've got, just for, I suppose, for transparency on what I've put as expectations, and these are for me, and then I'll transfer them to you, and then transfer them to like the wider population, people around me. I've got like honesty, physical capability, creating of a safe environment, bravery and discipline, which I think, to kind of summarise that, it's to do what is right and not what is easy. That for me is definitely a trait that I'd look for in people. Selflessness, and then pride and confidence as well. Again, quite intertwined there. I think of my partner, I think of my mum, and I think of me nan. Mm-hmm. As high up on any list amongst these other people I've written in terms of a list of people as well. So the big thing I'll take away, and it's good listening to Paul list their femininity, because I'll be honest, I've focused looking at masculinity because that's what we've done today in the podcast. But I think what I'll take away, and I think what hopefully people who listen and watch take away today as well, is that masculinity and femininity in their purest form are very aspirational. The traits that are involved in being masculine, in being feminine, are traits that I hope unanimously people have listened to today and think, yeah, I aspire to be like that. There's a lot of noise now in society in particular around masculinity, and I think hopefully what we've done today is break it down to its purest form. And I believe it's positive masculine. I believe that truly masculine men, women who demonstrate masculinity, are a net positive on society, without a doubt in my mind. Mm-hmm. I hope with us breaking it down today, we've spoken about how these things can be taken to the extremes as well. Just like anything that's positive, if you exercise in a far too extreme way, it becomes negative.
If you're overly confident, if you're overly dominant, if you're overly, whatever it is.
And the same for the feminine traits as well. Some of them taken to the extreme. If someone is extremely vulnerable at all times,
overtly emotional,
emotional, acts upon their emotions all the time, is overtly vulnerable,
more sensitive,
overtly sensitive. These things taken to the extreme can become negative as well. But if we look at them as they are, for me, all the traits and the characteristics that we've spoken about this morning are extremely positive, and things that we can all look at and try and implement into our own lives and work on individual basis or collectively as well. So that's my takeaway. It's been great to listen to what Paul said about the feminine traits. Mm-hmm. And now looking at those, and as he listed those, I think I try and be all of those things as well. Not intentionally to attack, like I haven't read a list of them and gone, I want to be like that, but now he's mentioned them and now he's listed them, I think, they sound like things I'd love to be more of or get right.
Yeah. Wonderful. They're almost like things you'd like people to list about you after you're gone. Yeah. Just sort of, he was all of these things. For me, one of the things that I tend to do, my takeaway today, is the self-help thing. One of the things I do, which is counter, it sounds like I'm being like humble bragging, and I'm really not. I tend to, and I don't know if this comes from being an only child or whatever, I tend to put everyone else in front of me all the time, and I'm running around constantly trying to please everyone, and I'm doing it so that everyone has a little piece of me and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes that's at the detriment of myself, and sometimes that's at the detriment of the people closest to me, because I'm completely burnt out. I'm not as able to be present for my kids, for my partner. And if we're talking about feminine role models, the two people in my life, my mum, who's being unbelievably courageous at the moment, as you know, she's ill, and still taking every day as it comes and not letting life defeat her. And my wife is really, really good at the self-help. She's worked hard at herself. She builds things into her daily, weekly, monthly routine that it just take absolute discipline. She does yoga every single day to keep flexible and keep her core, and because she has a bad back and had a bad back from like having kids and stuff like that. She journals every single day about her feelings and thoughts and relationships to things around her and all that. And she always exercises and tries to eat well and is disciplined, even with her drinking habits and everything. So I think probably trying to do a bit more of that self-care, and be a bit more selfish to the counterpoint, I guess, for myself. That's my real takeaway. But I've really enjoyed the conversation, lads. I've enjoyed the thought we've put into it and how some of the things that we've picked out. So thanks for your time today, and thanks everyone for listening and watching. Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers.